Welcome to Mobilizing Tech Talent, Tools to Grow, Attract, and Retain Albertans, a 6-part web series presented by the Information and Communications Technology Council as part of a capacity building program called TADE, Talent Acquisition for the Digital Economy. The objective of TADE is to give small and medium Alberta employers HR tools to help them find, hire, and retain digital talent, which is essential to businesses across sectors to thrive in the digital economy. TADE is a free program funded by the Government of Alberta in partnership with the Government of Canada. A link to the program's resources can be found in the description below. We're covering a great topic today, so we hope you find it informative. Hello everyone and welcome back to Alberta Impact, the great series we've got going on right now in partnership with Ictc. Today we're taking a hard look actually, at soft skills. And joining us today, we've got some great experts in the field, people who have done some phenomenal research and have a lot of experience with this topic. We have Fawn Rice and Kieran O'Neill with Ictc and Victoria Lennon from TIES. And they're going to touch in a little bit on what they do and how they do it. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you.
You betcha. I think what we'll do is we'll start with Fawn. Do you want to give me a little bit of background on your position over there at Ictc and where your expertise lies?
Happily, yeah. So first of all, a bit of an introduction to Ictc, or the longer version is the Information and Communications Technology Council. We have two kind of halves to the team. So our focus is the digital economy and labor market in Canada overall. And then we have a capacity building team. And then Kieran and I belong to the research half of the organization. And we do a lot of labor market research, which means we work with both employers and job seekers to understand the skills that people need to get into jobs in tech. And so our interest in soft skills is kind of new because obviously these skills are quite critical, but haven't traditionally been a focus on our research. And my title is Manager of Research and Knowledge Mobilization, and I do a lot of kind of our qualitative interpersonal work, so a lot of talking to people and writing.
Awesome, right on. Kieran, how about yourself?
Yeah, I am a research and policy analyst at Ictc. I work closely with Fawn. And I think she kind of covered it, but essentially in all of our labor market research, soft skills keep coming up. And so it's kind of an area that we're gaining some interest in and some momentum in and starting to look more at.
Awesome, right on. And Victoria, yourself?
So I both have a private practice in life skills coaching, and I presently am working as an instructor for a digital training program for administrative assistants at an immigrant serving agency called TIES. And I teach both the hard skills and the soft skills in that program.
Awesome, right on. Well, we got a very rounded outlook on the subject, so this is great. So let's just start really quickly on touching base on what are soft skills. I think that the definition, kind of varies between individuals, but maybe we can start there. Let's start with Victoria.
I can jump in. So I've been a life skills coach for over 25 years, and there's all kinds of definitions that have floated around, but the one I like the best is from UNICEF, and it says these skills have been recognized as the psychosocial competencies and interpersonal skills that help make informed decisions, solve problems, think critically and creatively, communicate effectively, build healthy relationships, empathize with others, and cope with managing their lives in a healthy and productive manner. So I like that definition because it covers the spectrum of the skills that are needed.
Oh, very interesting. And Fawn, how about you? What do you feel how soft skills are defined?
Well, I think part of what is interesting is that employers in general, who we usually interact with, as well as HR professionals and job seekers, all, as Victoria said, tend to have slightly different definitions. And so part of our consideration and research is how to kind of come to a shared understanding of what soft skills mean, or life skills or human skills. I think we'll talk about the term a bit later. And because I think part of the danger of not having a clear definition for all of those parties is that employees, employers, HR professionals don't all know what they're talking about, which makes it kind of hard to effectively train people to get them into work. It's kind of an intuitive thing, kind of like we talk a lot about technology, right? Technology is actually really hard to define, even though everyone has a bit of an intuitive understanding of it. It's kind of a tricky word. So part of our goal is to work to understand this better. But right now, I'd say it's very, very subjective. It really depends on who you're speaking to. I quite like Victoria's definition, though.
Yeah. Now, how are they different from hard skills? And maybe we should touch base on what the difference is between the two.
So I'll jump in with that because I've had to do a lot of defining over the years, and especially now when the interest has come back up. So what I see is hard skills are always the content of what you do. And the soft skills are the process by which you do it. Mm-hmm. And that's why when you're talking about soft skills, they're universal. So whether it's somebody who's cleaning or somebody who's an accountant or an oil and gas worker, the skills are the skills are the skills.
Gotcha. Where would you identify some examples of that? So, I mean, you did say like between a cleaning and, like a technician. Can you kind of dump into like how employers typically articulate these and how they're discussed?
Well, I think they're becoming more clear in definition, and especially since we're moving more into our digital age. But I would say, like, if you want to do a bit of a laundry list, it's about what are the factors and competencies in building a team. So knowing how to do that, having impeccable listening skills, knowing how to ask the right kind of questions or how to brainstorm because you're in a process of critical thinking and problem solving, which is universal in all workplaces, because that's always what it comes down to is how do you deliver in the best possible way. I would say their emotional intelligence skills, the ability to give and receive feedback, how to problem solve and have a system, and more importantly, and most importantly, is what conflict management skills, especially because we're living in such a divided world. And it seems as though human beings have lost the ability to know how to cross that divide when we're so polarized. So about conflict management, and again, developing a neutral mindset, which I think we'll talk about later, but it's about understanding assumptions and how do you correct yourself in what faulty and true assumptions are. So that's kind of the matrix of skills that I look at.
Gotcha. Kieran, in your research, do you have anything to add to that from what you guys have discovered?
Yeah, I mean, one thing is that soft skills are hard to define in some ways, and in some ways they're kind of the things that we can't quite put our fingers on. And I think part of this is because there are kind of fewer like tests and certifications associated with soft skills compared to hard skills. And so, as Victoria has explained, there are some very specific things, and soft skills are obviously hugely important. But sometimes employers do struggle to name what exactly it is that they are looking for when they're talking about soft skills. And another thing is that soft skills and hard skills can kind of blend a little bit. An example that I think of is how a language, as in learning a new language, might be something that you call a hard skill, arguably, but communication skills are a soft skill. And so it's kind of that boundary can be unclear, a little blurry.
Gotcha. In the workplace, I mean, we talk about like what soft skills provide, and I think the discussion can revolve around culture and how people interact with one another, and that self-awareness and your awareness of your surroundings. So those are really interesting things. Fawn, how about yourself? Is there anything that you've like to add to that kind of perspective?
I do think that Victoria and Kieran have done a great job summing up Victoria's description of kind of soft skills as the process versus hard skills as the content is really valuable, because I think when we talk to employers, we hear a lot of employers defining soft skills more in opposition to hard skills. For example, well, Kieran named communication. We've done a survey of employers that I'll talk a bit about more later, But one of the most common responses to what do you think of when you hear the word soft skills is communication, right? Which is obviously just one piece of the huge matrix that Victoria was talking about. And then the other most common thing is non-technical, which is really interesting to me because it's, if you're defining skills as non-technical, so just in opposition to technical skills, do we really know what we're talking about, or is it just kind of the absence of what we think of as hard? And so I think that, again, Kieran and Victoria did a great job of summing it up, but a lot of really interesting research questions. Yeah.
Victoria, can you speak to your work on training soft skills and maybe the outcomes you've seen from that particular training?
Sure. So I've been at this for more than 25 years, and it's been mostly in the employment area, developing employability skills for people or essential competencies. And I probably have worked with every conceivable group on the planet Earth. So at one point I ran a work camp in the oil sands and trained the camp staff. And that was a really fascinating experience because it proved to me how valuable the training was. I've also trained international accountants, people to pivot into new industries from the industry they used to come from. And I've worked with lots of at-risk populations and also newcomers. And as I said, the matrix of the skills are the matrix of the skills. And I've developed, I was trained in a process called life skills, which is really a misnomer because life skills isn't about brushing your teeth. It's really about how you negotiate with yourself in the intra part of communication, so your personal communication skills, and then your inter with other people. So as I've coached programs from 30 hours up to 100 hours, and then with the camp staff, I was meeting with them for 30 minutes every 10 days over a period of 5 years. So what I found out is that these skills, even when you're working with them in tiny amounts, have a huge effect. So in the training programs I was in, because they were mostly government-based, and so there were strict deliverables, what in one population, the at-risk population I worked with for 5 years, our employment statistics were 70% employment after a 6 to 8 month period, which is incredible for the barriers that the particular groups that we worked with. In the accountants I worked with, all of them had 100% work placement. And I would say the statistics for employability, if they chose to stay in the profession, were well above 70%.
Wow.
So over and over again, I've proven the how well they work. And I see transformation in front of my eyes all the time when I'm working with groups of people and building their confidence and their ability to go out into the world and be successful.
That seems like that would be a really effective way of training, doing it in smaller chunks, because soft skills is something you have to work on personally. So being able to take away those things that you've been able to, cover in a 1 hour session for a couple of days, really let it sink in, and then, come back and find out what you yourself have discovered by what you've taught that's a really unique way of looking at it.
And if I can just add to that, I really believe that soft skills are not about the cognitive. So you can tell people, well, you need to develop your soft skills. Well, what does that mean? So you can read about soft skills. It doesn't mean that you're proficient in being able to manage with them. And so it's about being experiential, and it's about the practice, and it's about spaced repetition.
Gotcha. Very cool. Now, I think this one would be more gauged towards Kieran and Fawn. I understand ICT has done some research on soft skills. You've mentioned a couple of surveys that you guys have put out and some work that you've done in that area. And how they place in talent acquisition. Can you describe that research and what you've uncovered?
Yeah, I can start us off and then pass it to Kieran. He ran a really interesting study that he should talk about. For more of our general work, we have recently run a survey of employers across Canada and in each province. And I have a few kind of stats from Alberta that I'll pull up later. But the goal of that survey was to really understand, what do employers think of when they use the word soft skills. In addition to that, do they know how they assess soft skills? So are they doing it during the interview, during the cover letter, on the job, etc.? Do they have confidence that they're assessing soft skills accurately? Another interesting question, I think, is, do they think that when employees are applying to their roles, are people more likely to accurately self-report kind of soft skills or technical skills? And again, I'm falling into this binary that we decided we didn't like, but I think it's interesting to consider, as Kieran mentioned, how difficult it is to test for, in a lot of cases, soft skills. Might lead people to think, okay, I'm applying for this job. We have a boilerplate, communication, interpersonal empathy. I'm going to say I have all those things because I might not even be able to self-assess, right? So there's a lot of really interesting questions about how these two parts of the labor market match up. And I'll pass it over to Kieran.
Yeah, I mean, who thinks, I have terrible communication or leadership skills, right? Versus like, I am a terrible coder. I know I'm a terrible coder. I cannot code. But yeah, the project that Fawn was talking about was, we were looking at newcomers to Alberta, so recent immigrants, and how they were finding tech roles in the province, and kind of matching newcomers and tech employers. And so one big, obvious, maybe not that exciting finding was that like employers really value soft skills. So not super surprising. And Ictc knows this, which I guess this is a good time to plug a new program run by our colleagues in the capacity building side of the organization called AIM, or Agile Industry Mindset. And it's essentially to help people improve their soft skills. I think you can contact just like info@ictc.ca if you're interested in learning more about that. But essentially, it's just because it's obvious to us that soft skills are really important, not just to get hired, but then to do well in your role. But that employers like soft skills isn't the most interesting finding. The most interesting finding from that project for me was that something you mentioned earlier, Bryce, about kind of culture fit. And it's that sometimes soft skills can get like mixed up with culture fit in the mind of employees. So in this Newcomers project, sometimes employers said that newcomers didn't have adequate soft skills. And that may be true in some cases, but really this is often also related to things around kind of like hiring practices and expectations and norms related to interviews and cover letters. And obviously these things vary from country to country. And you can see how kind of those aspects of communication or what have you might be considered soft skills when in reality they're just kind of understanding context. And I think that goes back to the point about these things can be learned. Additionally, they can be kind of like confused. Soft skills can be confused with judgments of just, do we like this person we're thinking of hiring? And kind of labeling that versus explicitly assessing soft skills, I think, is a really interesting area.
Oh, that's a really good point, actually. Just overlooking bias and getting down to what the science is of it. So, how does soft skills show up in across job roles, and what are some of the most sought after soft skills?
If I can answer. Go ahead, Victoria. Okay. I was going to only answer one part of that question. Something came to mind is that the how do they show up across different jobs? I was recently looking at this. It's called ONET. It's a directory of kind of jobs and then skills that are associated with them. At least that's part of ONET. And I saw in it that soft skills, like 16 or 17 things that you probably call soft skills, are associated with the same jobs in like so many different types of jobs. So everything from like fashion designers and dietitians to chief executives and a range of managers. And I think it brings up lots of interesting questions about exactly how these things do show up across different jobs. And maybe that it's kind of unclear how they differ when they are required in similar jobs or required in different jobs, and what actually we're distinguishing when we're talking about those skills. But sorry, go ahead, Victoria.
Well, then I'm fascinated with what your list is, but the things that I've come up with across the board, flexibility, adaptability, and an agile mindset, critical thinking and problem solving, and being able to apply it within a team context. I call something like servant leadership is a fancy word for customer service. So being able to put your ego out of the way and serve the situation, not get your personality or biases in the way. And that leads to developing a neutral mindset, because I think when you properly train in the soft skills area, you end up developing a neutral mindset. Knowing how to negotiate and handle conflict is the one I hear all the time from employers. And creating a win-win outcome from a conflict situation rather than more conflict. And then I think really importantly these days are your self-management skills, because as we've been isolated and away from each other, we've had to take a hard look at, how do we manage ourselves intrapersonally so we can be excellent when we're in interpersonal relationships, and then really knowing how to give and receive competency-based feedback. So those would be the things that I see as a theme all the time in the employability area.
Yeah. From the pandemic, for sure, everybody's self-management has definitely been put to the test. That's for sure. Can I get out of bed on time, even though I don't have to go anywhere today? Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So I guess from an employer's standpoint, like, how do you identify that? Like, how does an employer, what do they look for to identify what those soft skills that they require in their job environment from an employee? I don't know who would be best to answer that. I mean, maybe from some of the research from Ictc, like from Fawn and Kieran.
Happily, I can give a little bit of insight from our survey of employers. And so most of the employers we talked to kind of felt like job candidates, like I said, are more likely to accurately self-describe their technical skills, which makes assessment kind of hard, right? Because you have a lot of people coming in, as Kieran said, thinking, I've got great empathy, great leadership, of course, right? We don't accurately self-assess always in those areas. And there's also the problem of a lack of certification and testing. So in the survey that we ran, I've got a few figures here. Interestingly, Alberta kind of stood out among the provinces. So 81% of Alberta employers said that they ask situational questions to gauge a person's ability to communicate in an interview. And also quite a few, 83%, rely on cover letters. And those figures are a bit higher than other provinces across Canada. So while I couldn't for confidence say that there's like a best way to assess these skills, I think a bit more explicit attention to how this happens would reduce opportunities for subjectivity with regard to that question of culture fit that Kieran was mentioning earlier. So we don't see a ton of consistency in this area, but a lot of interesting variation. And one other, I think, interesting finding from that survey is that confidence in how well employers are assessing soft skills really varies with age. So we take a look at two different variables and kind of see if there are trends within them, right? And so one of our variables was what age the employer is. And so employers over 35 were a bit more likely to feel confident that they were assessing soft skills accurately as compared to younger employers, which, I mean, you can interpret that in a number of ways, and we can't provide a certain interpretation, but I think it's interesting that, perhaps maybe greater confidence just comes with more experience, or people have had a bit more time in the field, or kind of younger employers have a bit of that self-doubt still. But a lot of really interesting trends in this space.
Very cool. And so, how can they properly assess a soft skill? I mean, do they identify that in an interview? Is it in a job description? I mean, there's those first impressions that we get when we meet somebody to interview them for that, and then we've got that impression that we get from the paper. So, how can they identify that? And maybe I'll send it over to Kieran. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. It's a good question, and I guess to add that I haven't seen any research or anything explaining how employers can do this most effectively. And so maybe a first step is developing that research, and maybe it's out there or starting to be out there. But I think it goes back to kind of defining, to build on what Fawn was saying, really defining what it is that employers mean when they're talking about certain skills. And so you'll see job postings that say that they want you to have, good leadership. But depending on what the position is, they might want different things in what they're talking about with leadership. And so I think it's important for them to be able to place that term on a rubric and define exactly what they're thinking about, so that when they interview people, they can assess them relative to their peers, on a rubric or using an exercise or some sort of assessment, just to kind of go back to trying to keep this hiring process something that's consistent and not discriminatory.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's bang on. I really agree with that. Now we've been talking lots about the employees and working and developing their soft skills. Now, flipping it, how about the employers? What kind of soft skills do they need to be aware of so that they're not restricting their hiring options on themselves?
This is a really great question, and we were chatting about Victoria with this when we first met earlier, and part of the question around this thing of culture fit, of wondering, when employers are interviewing someone and trying to assess their soft skills, are they thinking critically about it, or is it just, I like this person likes me, we're kind of similar, and that's the danger, right? That's where subjectivity and bias kind of come into play. So I think from Victoria's great list of in-demand soft skills earlier, we can see quite a few that would be very valuable to employers, including that kind of self-awareness, critical thinking, active listening, accountability, problem solving. All of those we can recognize as valuable in leadership, and also valuable for conducting as unbiased an interview as possible. And I think Victoria has some commentary on this, and the skill she teaches called neutral mindset.
Yeah, well, right where I was going was neutral mindset.
Perfect.
So I agree, and it's about, I used to laugh because the camp staff would say to me, Victoria, we've learned all these amazing skills. What's the reason that the team that you're on aren't practicing these skills? And I used to laugh because it was a construction situation. So just slowly over time, my colleagues became very interested in how the camp had changed and what the staff were like, and they requested actually some training. And my thought is that everybody, whether you're an employee, mother, father, child, we all need the same matrix of skills. We need to know how to manage. And as far as neutral mindset, the biggest, I think, lesson that I teach that's valuable for everybody is about assumptions, what they are, and how you check your own biases and assumptions. So I think that's very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
Victoria, and it's learning how to know who you are so you can give yourself a break. Well, I'm like this, so I know I'm like this. So now I have to work extra hard to be open and neutral in a situation, and that's how you develop.
Yeah, absolutely. Victoria, I think you've kind of answered it, but soft skills, can they be taught, or are they intrinsic?
I think they're both, and I think we have to get into our personality dimensions of whatever evaluations we use, our brain processing style, and then from that, knowing and understanding that, I think you can teach a matrix to everybody. Mm-hmm. And it's about being able to tailor it according to the audience and their processing styles.
Mm-hmm. And in ICTC's research, Kieran, have you discovered anything around those lines as well? Like, has that been something that's been brought forward about teaching soft skills?
Yeah, I think most notably Victoria's work shows that she's been spending the last 25 years teaching soft skills, so they can definitely be taught.
Yeah.
And Fawn and I wrote a blog post about soft skills, partly kind of just talking about how people define them, how people name them, if soft is the right term. Maybe I'll let her talk more about that. But one thing that came up was the term malleable as opposed to soft. And I think that's really interesting. They're skills that are kind of exactly that, can be morphed and changed and allow people to, for example, switch jobs. Transferable skills is another term used. And so I think that's kind of key in all of this, is that these skills actually are things that can be changed. Sometimes it just takes a course or some effort to be able to do that.
Yeah. So, that's a good point. Fawn, maybe you want to speak to that. Is soft skills the right term for this topic?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And there's quite a few perspectives on it. But like one question I would ask kind of people listening and ourselves on this call is, what really comes to mind when you hear the word soft, right? And is it kind of like cushy? It's very vague, right? It's very like non-specific. And so there's quite a few interesting connotations with that word, which personally I think aren't super useful for this conversation. So we first started thinking about this because some of the professionals we talked to, some of the experts working in HR said, oh, we're moving away from this word. Why do you still use it? And there's a lot of interesting reasons for this. One of the big ones is kind of gender, is this idea that people associate the word soft with kind of femininity and women in the workplace, which can be seen as a pro, right? Like if soft skills are more and more essential, maybe there's more of a role for women. But I think the danger in that is that, maybe it kind of slightly suggests that women can't do math, right? Women have only soft skills. Conversely, it kind of penalizes men, right? It says that, women are the ones with the soft skills, men aren't as good at communicating or as empathetic, right? Which both of those we know to be kind of dangerous stereotypes. And then I think the other kind of interesting thing is soft. Does that lead people to value them? Does that lead people to take the skills seriously if the term is soft? And there's a great quote that we used in the article by Elad Levinson, who's an executive coach in California, who's written about this topic. And he says, I feel that using the term soft skills perpetuates the assumption, bias, and habit of thinking that soft equals expendable. It implies that we need everyone to use Excel, but it is less important that they be held accountable for being a good communicator and a kind person. And I think Victoria's use of the word life skills is a really good example of really highlighting how essential these are for both personal and professional development. And we've seen quite a few alternates used, such as human skills, transferable skills. So I think it's really worth thinking about because it carries a set of different assumptions and biases into the workplace and into the hiring process.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, I think we've really covered a lot of ground here, about this topic on soft skills and, where employers need to be aware of, where employees need to be aware of, some of the resources, obviously, that are out there right now for training, such as what Victoria offers. And so this was a fantastic conversation. I want to thank you all for coming in and talking to us and educating us on this. And that's where we're going to wrap it up here today. Thank you again. And for more information, we're going to have some links here below this video. I definitely will be linking to your vlog there, or your blog, sorry, and we'll hopefully get some more traction and get some education out there for the people.
Thank you so much, Bryce.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and found it informative. Ictc recently launched a soft skills training course called AIM, or Agile Industry Mindset. AIM includes problem-solving tools and how to use them appropriately and responsibly. Other modules include emotional intelligence, how to be effective in an agile team, and conflict resolution. This course is meant to guide participants in the management of their professional and personal life.
What that's called.